Hello everyone, Michael Mechanical here, and in today's video we're going to be doing a bit of a channel update, video update, and talk about a few things before I actually start getting into anything. So to be realistic, this is going to be very hard, but I'm going to use this camera to try and take some video. However, the problem I'm having is the camera doesn't have a really wide lens, so to essentially get up close, I have to literally, to get a picture of everything, I literally have to be back here and I have to move things out of the way, so it's going to make it really annoying unless I work with what I've got and just leave everything alone, don't waste time on unnecessary moving things around. Just all I got to do is move the camera around and that's it, because we like getting those shots on the angle of the cars and what they look like and how they feel. Now, as I was saying in another video, Dad's car is been pulled apart again. He's getting a new keyway put into the crank to fix one problem, hopefully, and it'll be tighter than before. Although it was pretty tight to get off, it was a problem. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the top end, the crank, the timing belt on. We're going to put the water pump back on. We're going to put everything back together in the front, and whether it works right or not doesn't really matter. We know where the problem is. We're pretty certain we know where the problem is, because as I was talking to Dad before, we're trying to identify why the car went from running really good and you could put it in gear, put your foot on the brake and it was fine, to when we just straight away took it out on the road and he went full bore down the road and he tried to blast it. It didn't like it at all and it didn't go. So we got home, we shut it down for a second and got some degreaser to try and find a vacuum leak to try and identify why there's no power. And as soon as he started it back up again, it was fine. Put it into gear, put his foot on the brake, and then it started struggling to run and operate. Now, what we believe that's a vacuum leak, but we cannot see the vacuum leak from the top, because when he machines the valleys, they sometimes go on a bit of an angle, and so if you don't have enough clamping force on it, it's not going to clamp very well, and it's going to be like the top seals but the bottom doesn't. So what we're going to do is we're going to essentially take this manifold off the top here, and then what we're going to do is access all the bolts for the valley and tighten that down. Worst comes to worst, what we also have to do is we have to take the valley out anyway and redo the gaskets yet again, and with it we have to weld up one. I can't really show you guys. We have to weld up one of the threads because it's a helicoil now. This bolt is an original because there's a nut underneath, because Dad accidentally, when he was pissed, he went the wrong way and he over tightened the bolt because he was trying to crack it, but he was failing to crack it because he was actually ripping the thread out as he was going the wrong way, and he didn't realize that he's using so much strength and it's requiring so much force to try and loosen it. It's like, what the hell? If he went any harder, he probably would have felt the thread pull straight out, sort of thing. It would have suddenly went loose, and then why isn't the bolt coming out? He's actually very lucky to get the bolt out of the hole, because that would have been very difficult to get out if he had pulled the thread. Now, good news, bad news. I got all these additives and stuff here, but after watching the video, I'm actually concerned about using them, because of where I'm going to use them, what it's for, and what are the problems that are going to arise from doing this. So everyone knows a little bit about the Tata Telcaline and how it's hard to get parts. If I use the Engine Flush Plus, that's the liquid moly product there, and I put it through the engine, it's going to take away all the sludge that's sealing it up. That's what Scotty Kilmer said on his channel about why not to use an engine flush. And if you do that, the sludge and the dirt and grit and stuff could go into those oil valleys and block them up. And if they get blocked up, no oil flow can stuff up components. So, realistically, I do not want to stuff up that. I don't want to stuff up the rear main seal. I don't want to stuff up the crank seal. I don't want to stuff up any seals on the bottom end, because I'm not likely to pull the engine out to rebuild the whole thing. And that's because of all the components that I need to get, which I can't get. If I was to rebuild that motor, there'd be a damn good reason why, and that'd be because I'd be very happy with the way the car operates, runs, and how I want to make it work even better than before. Now, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, I need to validate that it is the valves causing the issue. So this product right here in my hands is what I'm going to use on the Tata to see if I can get it to run any better based on what I know. This is going to prove if what I'm guessing is true and accurate. There is so much carbon built up on the back of the valves in cylinders 1 and 2, which is the first point of contact for any oil, that it's just baked on the back and it's sort of like carbon. So this here should help wash it up because it's cleaning. It's going to clean and it's going to decarbonize those valves. So if we do that and the performance increases, it doesn't stall when you take your foot off the clutch gently and it can just go in first gear, idle, then that means that the valves are causing the issue, meaning if we replace the head gasket, manifold gasket, rocker cover gasket, rebuild the head, the thing will run better than it did when I first got it. So that's what that's for. There's a diesel, clean, and boost. I only got that because I wanted to try it because I don't know the operating condition of the injector pump, the injectors, and it's going to cost money to try and fix those things if they need fixing. So I'm going to put some of that in there to try it. It was cheap, it was on special. I'm going to return the engine flush for safety reasons. I can't afford to pull an engine out of the car and rebuild it. And yeah, that's how that's going. And if you're struggling with that, Mum, you can just open up the gate. I'll get this for you. But it's fine. Yeah, bins have got to go out. And this box here looks like it's moved over a bit. Now I can't get around the car. So. Someone's coming around tonight because they're going to have a look at Dad's V6 maybe, if it's together or not. And they're going to take their stuff that they've ordered through my dad's work, and then they're going to use it for something. So, we've got the Tata and the Triton in the picture. Mum's car's now out with my brother, going to work. Okay, so here we go. Now I get to put this here. I don't know why they put the little bin always to this side. It's a bit ridiculous because how you meant to see that. But they do see it anyway, so I guess I'm dreaming. But the Tata, I'm going to try and work around some of the issues with the Tata at the moment. One of them was the number plate. I don't think it's too much of a problem. Hey, Mum. Now, I've talked plenty about cars, but it's not very consistent on how I'm talking about them, so that's a bit of a problem. Okay, I'm going to have a drink. Okay, the reason we got the camera out, we're going to try and film this bad puppy getting built and fixed and whatnot. And the reason I'm going to do that is because if I can get enough content, I can then do parts of it and render it and stuff. I'm going to literally do a whole bunch in the engine bay that I can get this nice and clean and looking nice and neat. Get it looking like that section there, but even better, because it's all dirty over here. And if I can get it to look really nice and neat, get rid of all that rust in there, clean this all up, make this look like brand spanking new, that's all good. Hood doesn't really matter. I mean, look at this thing. It's been pressure washed to buggery that's gone. Dad's only has half, but we want to keep this original stickers and stuff on it. So what we could do is make it look like his. His is a half cut. This one's half cut as well. But we could always do that. We could always get the same sort of material and then put it there and cover it. That's the black stuff on the hood is all from oil spattering everywhere. So this is not going to be easy to get together because it's a Pajero. It's not as high mounted, the body's not as highly mounted as the Triton is. And it's got a lot of stuff we need to do. It's got a cleaning job to do with all this stuff. It's got a whole bunch of roof works to do. Like, we're going to try and clean this thing up. It's all the rust on the roof. It's all been painted over once, but as you can see, paint and rust, it didn't really work out too well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get up here with some stuff. I'm going to probably get a can of paint or something. And I'm going to clean it again spray it 2 to 3 times, coat it 2 to 3 times with 15 to 30 minute intervals between. It's getting colder now, so it's going to make it harder to dry. So 15 minutes is in hot weather, 30 minutes in a bit cooler weather, and yeah. So the idea is we're going to build this for a whole video or a couple of videos. I think I'll start with one video to show the whole project. Then I'll show bits and pieces of what was done along the way that wouldn't make it into the final cut of the first one. And that's probably how they do it professionally. I think that might be my original one that Dad broke because, no. I've got to order a new one for this one, if that's the case. Because they get broken all the time when people are not gentle and they're too rough. And it's not important, but it is. It stops it rattling around. That's all it realistically does. So, for this project, the steps that are going to be taken along the way is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the rust, clean, weld, clean, paint, clear. And that's what we're going to do. And the reason we're doing that process is because we got a welding job in there to do. And if we go over here, we have another welding job here to do with this flat. We have a bit of work to do in the rear there, clean it. Because that's not just sanding, that's also the chemical thinners and stuff. You wipe it and get all the dirt off, and the converters. Then what we're going to do is reassemble the rear brakes, because we have to rebuild. We have to pull them apart, put them back together, put all the rear together. I don't know if the bearings in the rear shafts are already lubricated or what. I'm tempted to just leave them alone, because the rear ones I don't think wear out as likely as the front, because the front relies on grease, the rear does not. I could always ask about that to someone. My dad never does his rears. I've never seen him do them at all in his life. So after the rear brakes are all done, after the rust and painting and all that cleaning is all done, all the paint work's done, we're going to move on to the front suspension. All this stuff that needs to be put together is going to get put back together in the third step. The step after reassembling the front suspension is to lift up the transmission, which is right there, because that's kind of in the way of putting the engine in the engine bay, and needs to be just right. Then what we're going to do is we're going to assemble the engine. So the engine is going to be assembled, lifted and lowered into the engine bay with torque converter. And the torque converter, Dad said, has to go in before the engine goes in. So you put the torque converter on the transmission, then you lower it in, you'll push it together. Because normally when you pull them apart, you unbolt the torque converter. I've done it on the ZL Fairlane over there, so I know that roughly what I got to do. I got to put torque converter in, lower the engine, drop it in, push it in, and bolt it together, and so on and so forth. I haven't actually realistically done one, as in assembled it before, but I pulled it apart. It's not easy, it's not hard, but I have to try and see how I go. Normally when you do a manual though, you put the clutch and all that stuff together first, then you push it together, but that's because of alignment and other stuff. I don't know about this scenario, it's a bit different for me. I've never done it like this. Okay, so after that, when we put the engine in, then we have to fit the interior. And when we talk about the engine, we mean the entire engine bay goes back together again. After that, we're fitting the interior. So there is a seat that's not in the car. I should actually say more than just fitting the interior. I mean, this thing needs clean. So we're going to literally refit the seat here. We might end up going to get a new seat belt for that seat there. There's one over there. And we're going to put all the interior stuff in here and put it all back together again and make it nice and clean as possible. How many kilometers has this thing done? This thing's only done 254,000 kilometers. That's okay. So, gonna fit the interior. Then after fitting the interior, it's all done. We're going to replenish all the fluids, but we have to remember the transmission here is dry. There is no oil in it at all, so we have to overfill it on purpose because the torque converter is empty. We could fill up the torque converter before we put it in, maybe, but normally what they do is just put it together, fill it all up, and then let the thing system flow on its own, not forcefully, because then there's extra weight and extra work to try and put everything together. Replenish fluids. Double check the transmission linkages and thermostat switch. So there's a thermostat switch on the transmission, but it's out of a different transmission, and he said it needs a resistor on it because it isn't quite the right one for this car. So he expects that it needs a different resistor. That will change when the switch goes on and off, and when there is an AT light on in the dash. Because when it goes on, you're meant to stop the car and let it cool down because it's too hot. So the switch needs to be checked and hooked up. I don't know if it's actually hooked up or not. I can't remember putting it on, just plugging it together, because I don't think it fitted. You have to literally do some wiring under the car to get that to work. Double check the wiring and earths. So essentially, when we do this, we can't start up the car until there's an earth on the bottom of the block, which is this wire right here. If that wire's not on the block, it's not going to run. You got to check that the glow plug light wire is actually on the glow plug wire like it should be. I think it might be this one here. No, it's not that one. That one's something else. There is literally a wire on this side. All the wiring is pretty much on this side of the motor. That's the loom wire. There's a separate wire. I have no idea what this one is here, but that looks like a glow plug wire. It could be, it might not be. I'm looking for the one that says to me, glow plugs. Nope. There's nothing here screaming at me I'm a glow plug wire, because that's too light. It's a very heavy wire. I'll find it when I go to put this together, but that one looks like it's the closest one to the glow plug wire at this point in time. Could always match it up to the wires over here on the relays. So that will be when it happens. So it's a bit too early to tell what's going to happen. Start up with open radiator cap for water filler and flush. The reason we're going to flush it is because we're changing the coolant. There might still be dirty coolant in the heater core, so we might want to blast that even beforehand, and might even looking to get new hoses because they look a little tiny bit junk, and we don't want to see a hose blow. Not to mention good coolant. But it's all expensive to do all the hoses. There's like $20, $20 there. That's about $60, mate. It's about $100, $120 in hoses that need to be done. We've already got fuel lines because I bought some when I did Triton, and then I replaced them again with some even heavier dutier ones because I could, and I bought them and they were expensive, but they were cheap because it was just leftovers. That's all it was. And I wanted some for testing a pump out. And then once we've done that, we essentially do start up with open radiator cap for water fill and flush. That's the last step on this piece of paper. That's what we've got to do. Forget about this Dewey 000 up here. That was a guy who literally cut me off in my own lane and almost caused an accident. So for the next update, I'm going to talk about the Triton MJ 1995 because I wanted to know how much have I spent and how much left do I have to spend, and is it realistically worth going the rest of the way? I'll only get $1,000 for my car, as it is. I gotten 240 something back from Register Department from unregistering it, and about $60 back from the insurance company for uninsuring the car, because I don't really want it to get stolen. But at the same time, it was cheaper that I'd just get unregistered and do all the stuff that I have to do. It could have been false insurance and say, hey, I've spent this money 10 months later, I want my money back, sort of thing. I unregistered then, and then, it's unrealistic to do that. That's stupid, because they'll never get you back all that money. Because if in that time frame they're paying for a risk and nothing happens, like you're paying for a risk and nothing happens, then you're taking all their money back. And if you had an issue, then you would have lost that money, but you still would have had to pay an excess. You're ripping them off at that point in time if you tried to do that in the future. You literally do it as soon as possible. You let them know as soon as possible what you want to do, and then they'll give you back this month plus a little bit extra depending on when you unregistered it and when you paid it and when it was unregistered. They pay you back what you paid, they pay you back anything left over for the period, and that's what you get. $60-something is what I got back. I only recently spent $43 on insurance, so that was pretty okay. So, on my car, I've spent $3,000 already, most recently on the car. I've spent way more than $3,000 on it, but this is what I've spent on it. The alternator cost me exactly $426. I didn't buy a cheap one, I bought the expensive one because the guy was offering me to buy the cheap one and said, you know, buy the cheap one and knock this car off because that thing isn't going to last long and it's cheaper. So if you buy the cheap one and you get rid of it within a year, it will still work. Then someone else buys it, then if the thing goes on them, then they have to replace it anyway because it will only be good for parting. So $426 for a freaking really good alternator with good reliability, and it's not going to fail. The water pump cost about $160 from top of my memory. The head recon cost $320, and the roller rockers I had to replace cost $60. All in all, it costs $966 for just the head to be reconned. I'm pretty sure it costed more because I had to get an oil filter and oil and stuff, and Mum helped me with that, so I owed her $300 at that point in time. But I had $1,000 at the time. I didn't want to overspend it because I needed it for fuel and stuff. The loom cost $200 to repair. The rims cost $200 to buy new ones. Brake parts for the drums cost $350. The fluids cost $40. I gave up and gave it to ABS when there was steel coming out, and it cost $383 exactly. The coolant cost $72, but it's a consumable that kept getting consumed, and so I was wasting that money. I prepped the AC essentially to be reinstalled, and I got a bunch of parts, $66 for the belts and the seals and all the other little goodies, even the wheel. The tensioner cost me $30, but it's still the wrong tensioner. The front calipers, I got all the parts to rebuild them last year, and that was $315. Actually, I think I did them at the same time as the other brakes. So $315 for the calipers, $130 spent just replacing a tail shaft, including tools, $42 for the mirrors. That came to $1,828. Then the last one that I had was the ABS, $80 plus $120. The brake line plus the flush, so that would have been about $240, $160. Yeah, that would have been about $200. It says $200 here, so I'm going to just say $200. And then in total, the whole car cost $2,994 to repair since last year sometime, like mid-year. Now, what's left to spend is, I said $2,994, that's what I've spent. What's left to be spent on the car before it is 100% done, and I'm including paint on this one. I don't have to get paint, but I've said $1,000 for paint. So if you take $1,000 off this, it'll be close to accurate for repairs, not for painting, because paint is not as important as the rest of the stuff. It's going to cost $5,890 to get this thing fully roadworthy and safe and secure. This is including the engine rebuild, the power steering pump, the power steering line, the suspension kit, and it includes a bunch of parts I thought I'd have to buy separately, but that's the rear leaf springs plus front shockers and stuff. The front suspension is going to cost about $800, the trays $1,000, exhaust $700, paint $1,000, tachodometer $140, diff service $100, mud flap front $60, steering wheel $200. Now I didn't include every freaking price, but the engine's going to cost $1,200 because I'm going to buy a kit, recon the whole engine, and put it back in the car. Power steering pump's going to cost $170, and that's to replace it because the seals are going bad. The power steering line's going to cost $80 because the thing has a crack in it and it's leaking. Maybe even might have some leftovers from that to repair all the other lines if they are stuffed. The suspension kit's going to cost $1,540. That includes front shockers, bushers, rear leaf springs, torsion bars, and a bunch of other things, including, I think, some shackles, or just the U-bolts. I don't think it came with shackles. Front suspension is going to cost $800. That's ball joints, tie rods, bushes, and rubbers that are not included in the suspension kit. The front tray is going to cost about $1,000 to rebuild the tray. I reckon it'll be less, but it might cost about $1,000. So if we can repair the tray for under $1,000, then that will bring down the price. The exhaust is going to cost $600 to $700. Last time I heard it was $600. The guy wanted to make a new exhaust for the thing. The paint is going to cost $1,000. The tach odometer, $140. That's based on a quote that I got. He said he can fix it for $140 and tune it and stuff. The diff is going to require servicing front and rear. I say $0 to $100 because I've already got the oil, but I need to get the bolt. And if I can't get the bolt, then I've literally got to do something about that. I might have to take someone that can get it out. Or I can weld to it, pull it out, and buy a new bolt, put it in there, and it'll be done. The mud flaps for the front are a legal requirement on that vehicle because they came out with them. And if we look at this car here, it has mud flaps front. This one here has mud flaps front. If you don't have the mud flaps, if your car's low enough, you don't need them. But if it's high, you need them because rocks get thrown and hurt people. Oh my god, my hair's doing the weird thing that it does in the game. And the steering wheel is going to cost $200 because the top is twisty and the rest of it's nice and hard when you try to twist it. So that's the only reason it's got to be replaced. Or I could glue it, but the reason I will replace it is because I've lost the screw and the clips are all sort of worn out and they're bent like this and it doesn't really hold very well and it keeps falling off while I'm driving. If the screw wasn't there, it'd literally fall off into my lap and it will do that all the time. But because the screw is there, it just pops off every now and then when I'm hitting bumps. Just like with the fuse box, it has that tray plate thing and that even falls off a lot of the time as well. So $6 grand in repairs left, and I've already spent $3 grand. So in total, this is a $9 grand car to fix. If you think about the money that I have to spend on it, what I've spent on it, what I need to spend on it, essentially I could have bought a brand new car with that money, or a second-hand new car. The problem is, my car's old, and it's not really worth it, but at the same time it is. It drove really well, but I reckon it could have driven even better if the engine was in good condition. I realised when I've driven it with the problem of the compression leaks and stuff, and also I'm going to try and show you the list. I can't show very well because I suck at this stuff. Well, I don't suck at it, it's just the paper and the camera, and I have to literally see what I'm filming. Okay, that's what the list looks like. So I don't even remember what I was saying. When the engine was running like crap and it was vibrating and shaky and struggling, it literally felt powerful, but it literally couldn't put out much. It wasn't doing much. But as soon as the head gasket blew, it ran smoother. It felt a bit sprintier and more like it's not got internal resistance. So it lowered its own internal resistance, which made it run better. And by dropping the compressions, I believe that will give it more power, because when it was at 520, it literally felt less powerful. But as soon as it dropped down to maybe 440, the 500 ones, I think it fixed the problem with over boosting and all that stuff. So if you're running the engine lane, you lose a lot of power, it creates a lot of heat, causes lots of issues. I need to do some more investigating into that one, but yeah, gonna leave it at that. This car here, Dad's Pajero. Let me be realistic with you guys. I've told Dad already, don't worry about spending money on this before you even touched it. Don't spend money on it. Just try to fix it with what you got. Just throw some shit in there and do stuff. If you really want to do this, go right ahead, but I wouldn't touch it because I know this thing is a money pit. We've already put brand new bolts in the thing because I bought them, had them. This thing here is a money pit. It's eating Dad's pocket. He's literally spent about the same amount that thing needed. That thing was a money pit. It is a money pit because when we got it, it was $1,100 to purchase. The transmission cost about $2,500 to rebuild, including the torque converter, I believe. So that brought the price of the car up, the cost of what we've spent on it, from $1,100 to $3,600. The engine to rebuild cost $500 for the machining, and about $500 in parts to $1,000 in parts. So $1,500 on that is almost $5,000, and then there's about $1,000 in parts left. So I don't know what the number is I just said. I think I said $5,000. It's $4,900 plus $1,000 is $5,900. That's how much this car cost to repair. In total, that's how much money had to be spent on this to get it to the point where it can be essentially road driven. My car's going to cost more than $5,900 because I bought the car, repaired the car, and it's still got problems. Dad's Pajero. He's had $3,500 spent on the motor. He bought the car for $4,000. Add the two numbers together, it already exceeds the white Pajero. It already exceeds maybe the Triton even. So $3,500 plus $4,000. That's $7,500 worth of car right there. Let's go even further than that. All the money we've been spending on the motor is about $1,000. So $7,500 up to $8,500 on this one car. $8,500. And the thing chews fuel. It's a fuel guzzler. It keeps running like crap. He's got suspension issues, so it brings it up from $8,500 to $9,500. He's had this car a long time though, so in some ways it's, you know, earned its value over the time that he's had it, because it's kept going and going and going, and it's done pretty well for what he's had it for. It's got steering problems that could cost about $1,000, so we'll bring that to $10,500 of car. $10,500 of car right there, because of what its problems are. This thing here is only about $6,000. If you think about it, with all the money spent on that car, he could have done this car twice over. The exact same scenario, twice over. He would have had two cars exactly like this. Yeah, sure, it has its problems with finding the freaking parts like the brakes, but come on, the money spent on here is way better than spending on that. This thing even has better steering components and stuff. This is where you got to learn the value of something is not based on how much you spend on it. It's about the quality of the parts and how much you've got to spend on it. And if you add it all up, if it adds up to $6,000, that's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's bad. I'd say that's pretty damn good. If it all adds up to $6,000, it's good. If it adds up to twice that amount, you could have bought two really good cars for that money. And don't forget, I think we added on paint on this. You don't necessarily need to spend paint. Although, to be honest, I don't think it was this car that we said paint. I think that was the Triton, not this car. But we've already got the paint. There's a couple $100. The thing that makes this thing cost more than $6,000, if you have this car, is the fact that you got to literally, if you want it to cost less as $6,000 exactly, or around that $6,000 mark, you then need to do the work yourself. If you give it to someone else, it's going to cost about twice the amount, because time and labor is worth something to someone else. And when you're doing work on a car, it costs you nothing but your time. So if you did this in your spare time and you just have a motorbike or a runabout of some sort that's a shitbox and you want to build a good car up, $6,000 will get you all the way if you choose your cards right. The only problem is, this thing, we're lucky that there was money already spent on it, a little bit. The injector pump had $1,200 to $1,600 spent on it, and that included, I think, injectors. It had good injectors on it, a good pump on it. That's $1,600. If I put that on top of the $6,000, that gives you an idea of what you might have to spend on it in order to get it right. So, not every part on here. It's going to cost $6,000-8,000. That's your best marks to look at. I would say when you get a car, aim for the $6,000 figure when you're doing the whole lot, the whole kit and caboodle. Know your prices of what everything roughly costs and identify what you actually have to do. So go in with a plan, plan is, what does a 6-cylinder cost to rebuild? What does a 4-cylinder cost to rebuild? What's the cost difference between a diesel and a petrol? And go from there. Figure out, is it a 4-wheel drive? If it's a 4-wheel drive, it's got much heavier components. The steering components cost twice as much as a normal one. And let's talking about coils in the rear, because they cost a bit at the rear, the coils. A kit for the rear coils is about $600. The kit for the leaf springs is about $600, so it's about the same for the rear. But there's torsion bars in 4-wheel drives. They cost about $300, I think, to $600. Then you have all these ball joints. These ball joints here cost about $80 each, $60 to $80 each. In my neighbour's car down the road, it is a sedan. They cost about $20 each to replace, but you have to do it yourself. If you take it down a professional, it's only the price of the ball joint that on a full drive it costs. So he paid $60 to have the ball joints replaced on some of his components, and the ball joints themselves cost about $20 to $30 each. Here they cost $60 to $80 each. They're not cheap on the 4-wheel drives. Then you have the shockers. They cost a heck of a lot because they got to put up with a lot of off-roading conditions, whereas a sedan just has to be smooth, and they're very light duty stuff. I actually don't know if we can see anything on the Fairlane, but if you look at the suspension on that thing over there, and then we go look at the ZL, you'll understand what the component difference is between the two. This is a coil rear end. This is not leaf. This will probably need a rebuild of the suspension stuff. I don't think we can see anything, not realistically, but it's a coil. There's no leaves in the rear. Then if we go to the front and we look at the suspension components, they're not nearly as heavy. So it's got coil. The coils cost a lot of money to replace. Then you have the strut inside. The gas strut is not nearly as much. You have the camber adjustments and stuff. I've never actually seen the camber before. Then you have all these joints. There's a ball joint down there, ball joint up there. Look at that, that's shredded. Oh my god. I never even knew that was shredded. And this is literally one of those cars that they'd spent 12 grand on just to buy it. I'd say this car cost the most out of all of them, and it still needs money thrown on it. It's a money pit, that car, because it's old, it's got freaking issues left, right and centre. It never got serviced properly, I wouldn't believe, and that's why it had so many problems. He tried to fix it, but he's not an expert, nor was the person who helped him an expert. Yeah, okay, you've painted cars before, so what? That car being painted, it wasn't even a good job, because even though they did the work, it still rusted through, because they didn't do inside the car. They only did the outside, they didn't do the inside. And they didn't do nothing right, and that's why it rusted through. They did their job right. There wouldn't have been all that black goopy stuff. They used black stuff over there to, you know, try and seal it up. But when they did that, there's a problem. When they did that, all the water that goes in and tries to drain out, it was getting held there, and it rusted out the plate internally. So that messed that up. The ZL is a project for the future when I've got a bit more experience with welding and stuff. It's going to be a project when I've actually got 10 grand to start with, and actually have 10 grand for that car specifically, with reserves for other things. So even if I say I've got 10 grand, what I realistically mean is I've got 10 grand plus maybe 5 to 10 grand extra. That 5 to 10 grand extra is that leniency to do other things with my cars if I need to fix them. That's an emergency reserve. I'll never ever have 100 grand and say I've only got a 10 grand budget to spend on that sort of thing. It will never happen. So, guys, if we do these videos, I want to try and do them a lot better than I normally do them, because they're very hard to do. If I make this video here, the goal is within this week, this car is going to be driving. That is the goal for this car. And if we can't get this thing going within a week, oh my god. And I don't mean changing tyres. I mean this thing has to literally be running the end of the week so that it can be driven. It's either going to be this car or the Tartar's going to drive to someone's farm. And that's because this thing, I don't see this thing going together right ever again, because this thing needs a lot of time and energy and money spent on it to get it running, get it freaking legal. It's got problems everywhere. He even got free seat belts for it, and the seat belts are dodgy as anything. This is what they're meant to look like when they retract, right? When I pull this, I'll go straight over here and then I'll release it, and it's sloppy. It's still a bit sloppy. It doesn't really retract properly. And it sounds a bit dodgy. Look at this one. It's a lot smoother, and this one's clunky. So it could be a bearing, it could be anything wrong with that. And this was, when I was using the seatbelt, it was literally hanging out the door. That's the problem I got with Triton. These seats are okay. They're not, I'd say they're pretty shit for what they are, because these are old, these are worn out. This side here is just, it feels like cotton or something on this side. It's disgusting. Here it's nice and smoother. Here it's sort of smooth. That car there, the seats are way more nicer than these ones. They've even got cotton in the seats. Okay guys, so that's going to have to conclude this part of the video, because we've already wasted an hour of time. I'm going to have to figure out if I can actually track what I'm doing, what I've done, and things very, very well. I might even bring out the whiteboard and hang it somewhere or something, because I can track then logs, and then I can say, I've crossed this off the list, I crossed that off the list, and just go nuts on it. That would be a really cool thing to be able to do. Make one section of video where I'm going, well, have like music as like a victory speech, sort of like a victory video to sort of, I keep saying monotone in my head or monologue in my head. That's not probably what they mean. It's one of those things where you essentially have that board, you're basically having your victory, where you've essentially go back and you grab all those clips where you've crossed something off the board, and then you put them all together into one video at different times of the days, and then you try to make it look like this got done so quickly and it was so cool. It'd be super good to do that. Now what I've got to do, guys, is I've literally got to get into this game, got to start pushing this thing together as soon as freaking possible. I'm going to give myself just that little bit of time to say, well, I need this thing by Friday. That's what my goal is. If it's not running by Friday, then there's a problem. I think it's Saturday it needs to actually be running. So, I need to go start planning, start looking at what things are. And I've just said I might grab the whiteboard. Look at that, $200 on all that stuff. There's a whole bunch of other things on here. Contractor evaluates. Yeah, we're going to use this whiteboard, going to get some texters, hook it, hang it up somewhere, and it's going to take me a while. We're going to see what happens. I might register Tata, I might not. It will all depend if I can get it all going, if it runs better or not. We're going to see. Thank you for watching. Have a good day or night, wherever you are in the world. Michael the Mechanical out.